From the halls of Austin to the fights in D.C. that hit us at home, this is Politics with the Big Dogs.
All right, folks, Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs. Make sure you're signing up for our newsletter, politicswiththebigdogs.com. We have a great show for you today. Shocking, sadly, heartbreaking. The city of Houston, for example, has designated itself a sanctuary city yet again. In an overwhelming vote, they are not going to participate and hold criminals for ICE. It has been rejected, and the new-ish mayor is 100% on board. We also have an analysis of the SBOE. You might not have even heard of them, the State Board of Education. They designed the curriculum for our public school children. Well, guess what? Muslim activists showed up and were very vocal and critical about what we're teaching our children and argued, in part, it seems, that the Alamo is really an Islamic institution and should be taught that way. These same people are affiliated with one of the terrorist organizations designated by the state, CARE. Just shocking stuff. We're going to talk about Congressman Brandon Gill and his engagement in that fight. And then if we have time, we're going to move into Iran and Trump's actions, how it is beneficial and courageous, and the attack on American values. You know, for the last 25 years, we've been fighting the flood from the south. Now it's coming from the north, the east, and the west by the radical Islamists into Texas. We have to stand up for our values. So hold on, folks. It's coming at you. This is Politics with the Big Dogs. Thank you so much.
More with Anthony Holm coming up in just a minute. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter at politicswiththebigdogs.com. While you're there, make sure you listen to our previous episodes of Politics with the Big Dogs. Politics with the Big Dogs is brought to you by the First Amendment Alliance Education Fund. Got a question for Anthony Holm? Email Anthony at politicswiththebigdogs.com. Now, more with Anthony Holm on Politics with the Big Dogs.
Now we have to get into it. This is Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs. Be sure you're signed up for our newsletter, politicswiththebigdogs.com. We have a weekly newsletter, what's happening and why, some of the best hits. Additionally, sign on. We have a few petitions, one of which we're going to talk about right now, taxpayer-funded lobbying, banning taxpayer-funding lobbying. This is just astounding that this violation still occurs. And after 30 years of Republican control of top to bottom of the state government, here we are allowing local governments and taxing entities like school districts and MUDs and cities and counties and you name it, school boards, to use our tax money that they pull from us to fund Austin-based lobbyists who we've never heard of to go and advocate for crazy policies, number one, and then number two, to ensure that they have the right to increase our taxes so they can spend more of their money, our money rather, paying third-party lobbyists who live in Austin to continue to lobby on crazy issues that we oppose. So our friends at Texas Public Policy Foundation, TPPF.org, released yet another study. And taxpayer-funded lobbying just grows and grows. So let's go ahead and define some of it. So this is what's going on here. We have all these folks who live in Austin. They don't know our communities. They don't know Texas. And their entire job is to lobby the legislature. What's it mean to lobby the legislature, right? Almost all of them take these state reps and state senators and others out to dinner and drinks and come to know them and show up at their kids' birthday parties and do all sorts of things. Oh, hey, let's go to a basketball game. Let's get a limo and go to San Antonio and watch the Spurs. Oh, let's go party over here. Let's go party over there. And it turns out that these people who are all just habitual, on the pay lobby for a lot of different clients based on their relationships with members. They go and pitch and they say, oh, I know this person really well. I can impact their decision, even if it's a decision against the taxpayer interest. These third-party lobbyists really don't care much about policy, almost top to bottom. There's a few of them who do, but that is not the norm. The vast majority, 99% or more, whoever's paying me, I'm going to go and pitch, right? And we have this at the federal level as well. We even have it, foreign governments pay people at the federal level to work against U.S. interests. This is akin to that. Taxpayer-funded lobbying is akin to that. Why? because these third-party lobbyists who know the state reps and senators better than you do, better than I do, and they make an entire living and a career on this, and they're driving super fancy cars, let me tell you, making a lot of money, nicer cars than any of us drive. They're out there just for hire on any policy. So what does this mean? It means that about $110 million. So actually, let me back up a little bit. How lobbyists have to report what they're paid, they have to report a range. So it could be the low range to the high range to the mid range. And we've talked about banning taxpayer-funded lobbying. It's been one of the conservative priorities for years and years, but nothing's getting done about it in the legislature. One point, Governor Abbott put it on as an emergency item, but that just failed because all of these lobbyists are friends to the members, and they come up with some bogus scam and say, oh, no, you don't want to do this because then your school board won't have the voice that it would. And it results in all these little tiny cities and counties paying outrageous sums to a third-party lobbyist who has that city or county and 30 others working against the interests of taxpayers and often against the interests of their clients because those little cities often conflict with other ones. So they're recirculating our tax dollars to fight against our interests. And the higher range, TPPF came out and said, hey, the midpoint of the range looks like $66 million or so last legislative session was spent from taxpayer money onto lobbyists. And the higher range was $111 million. So there has just been this massive ramping up over the last 10 years of taxpayer-funded lobbying. And it looks like about 1 out of $6 paid to lobbyists come from taxpayer-funded groups. 1 out of 6. So these thousands of lobbyists walking the halls, forcing issues and carve-outs and special perks on the 31 million normal Texans, 1 out of 6 of them are funded with our own tax money. So what's it mean? Let's give some examples. The city of Houston. Okay, you would expect them to have a great big old lobby team. Now, he also expects them to have an in-house lobby team, and by that I mean the state reps and the state senators from Houston, our largest population area. They're going to look out for Houston. Nonetheless, the city of Houston goes and spends well over $1.5 million of your tax dollars, of our tax dollars, and hires third-party lobbyists in addition to their city-sponsored and paid lobby team and general and government affairs team, and in addition to all the state reps and senators coming out of Houston, be it Democrats or Republicans, to look out for Houston's interests. And what does it do? What's the city of Houston say that they want? They want, we want you to lobby for universal background checks for gun owners and folks trying to buy a weapon legally, red flag logs, and raising the age to purchase rifles. Semi-automatic weapons, raise that age, or the city of Austin's legislative agenda. Authorize local regulation of firearm sales and public carry. Magazine city capacity limits. Age-based purchasing restrictions, right? San Antonio, Dallas, Fort Worth all have some form of gun control rolled up in the matter of public safety that their lobby teams paid for by your tax dollars, these third-party lobbyists are out there trying to get gun control, right? Okay, well, there's one segment. Another segment are our school districts. Let's look at San Antonio Independent School District. Anybody living basically in Bexar County is paying some portion of their taxes for the San Antonio ISD. What do they have? Quote, oppose any bathroom bill. That's right. They want to ensure that little boys, even teenage boys, get to use a girl's bathroom in our public schools in San Antonio, and they're using your tax dollars to pay hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars even to lobbyists, to these Austin-based lobbyists who don't care about policy, who know all these members really well, and they're passing and they're pushing day in and day out at lunches, at dinners, at cocktails, at the limo to the Spurs games, at parties, at nightclubs. Hey, we got to do this. This is what your people want. It's what your school wants. School districts just almost uniformly, all the school districts oppose ballot transparency measures, right? Like anything that allows us to see what we're voting on. They oppose property tax reforms. One of the reasons our spiraling property tax is out of control is this taxpayer-funded lobbying. Any legislation that reduces local control. So these schools are also advocating again for gun control. They're advocating for abortion, climate change. I mean, it's just insane. Bexar County. So anybody who lives in Bexar County pays taxes to Bexar County. Guess what their commissioners and that county judge are doing? They're using your tax dollars to fund third-party lobbyists, all these folks who live in Austin, don't know anything about San Antonio or Bexar County, to, quote, support legislation that raises the minimum age to purchase a semi-automatic weapon from 18 to 21. Huh. Or Travis County, anybody who lives in Austin in that area, supports legislation allows counties to achieve emission reduction goals. So they want to take your gasoline-powered motors away, right? What about El Paso? Here's just an outrageous one, but El Paso has hundreds of thousands of people. El Paso County, quote, oppose legislation that seeks to criminalize or penalize a person seeking medical care that may include an abortion. So we passed a state law banning abortion, yet El Paso is using El Paso taxpayer money to fund Austin-based lobbyists to go in there and walk the halls and party with all these members and go to nightclubs, and lots of them have affairs with these members, and say, hey, we got to stop legislation that bans abortions. That's what our tax money, your tax money, my tax money is going toward. So what we are doing is we are calling on the legislature to ban taxpayer-funded lobbying, to make it affirmatively illegal to use our tax dollars to hire outside lobbyists. If a city or a county or a school board needs a lobbyist, they can come to us, the people, and say, hey, here's what's going on, and we need to hire a lobbyist, and we'll fund it. But they can hire it in-house. It can be somebody who lives in the community, who travels to Austin. We don't need these third-party vultures, which is what they are, just top-to-bottom vultures taking our tax dollars to ensure this cycle continues and grows. And it is growing. In the last 10 years, it has grown about 70%. It's just shocking. The city of Dallas pledged support for legislation grounded in, quote, diversity, equity, and human rights, and protections for LGBTQIA plus communities. So anybody in the city of Dallas is paying taxes to the city. Hundreds of thousands of those tax dollars are cycling to liberal Austin lobbyists who know the members in and out, party with them, do all sorts of chicanery with them, and this is what they're out advocating for. City of Austin's called for legislative action to dismantle systemic racism and advance equity across housing, education, and public health. So anybody paying taxes in the city of Austin, here's where your tax money's going. Vultures working against the interest of our values. San Antonio Independent School District supports, quote, allowing transgender students to work with their campus administration to determine which bathroom the students should use. All right, so I kind of buried the lead there, right? I should have led with that one. We have transgender mandates, and the tranny student in San Antonio Independent School District gets to decide which bathroom. So what's that mean? Anybody in SAISD is paying taxes, and there's some crazy activist, liberal lobbyist making millions of dollars usually in downtown Austin who just top to bottom talks to all these members and shows up at their kids' birthdays and plays games and pretends to be their pal and is hey, I'm hired by the school district. They want this. These are your people. We've got to find a workaround. And they often do, right? We talked about DEI. Supposedly the Republicans in the legislature banned it, and they banned CRT. Folks like Carl Tepper. We've talked about this moderate Republican from Lubbock. Go along, get along. When he was a candidate. I'm pro CRT. We got to recognize that the travesties that occurred to black Americans. And then he got called out on conservatives. Oh, no, that's not what I said. I shouldn't have been recorded when I said that. That's not really what I meant. And it was misunderstood. Now the guy is elected. He's a state rep. And we've talked about Tepper time on this show before, right? He's out there whining that You all may not fully understand that I'm a trial lawyer. I'm a Christian conservative Republican, strong Republican. And yes, I try cases. That's my trade. So Tepper's one of the people voting for the continuation of DEI. Oh, yeah, this is a great budget, great budget. We got to go and fund Texas Tech University and all these other institutions in West Texas without telling the voters that they're mandating racial quotas for those institutions. You must seek to graduate 31% of African Americans, and next year it needs to go up to 33%. And we're going to do a review on your tax dollars. They actually call out in West Texas, some of these institutions, the actual numbers of minorities that shall be graduated, not just admitted, but graduated. So TPPF, much of the data that I just cited to you comes from the TPPF study. I encourage you to go to TexasPublicPolicyFoundation.org, pull down their study, learn about it. We've had James Quintero, for one of their scholars, on this show in the past. I think about a year ago, he was on initially. He has been the leading mind behind taxpayer-funded lobbying, and he was doing it before it was cool. It's now gaining momentum, and we all need to go and sign those pledges, sign the petition. We'll go ahead and forward it to your members so they understand that there's grassroots juice behind us. But let me just leave you with a couple other examples, because I did sort of bury the lead, and I apologize, on the transgender San Antonio ISD, right? The city of Dallas was spent well over $1.6 million on these third-party Austin, vulture lobbyists. They're out advocating for ranked choice voting. They went out of the primary system, and they're using Dallas tax monies to go member to member. We've got to get ranked choice voting. We've got to get ranked choice voting. And then privately, no doubt, these lobbyists say it's the way to just disempower the Republicans. Get them out. We've got to get out of this primary system. And then if you actually look at some of these vulture lobbyists in Austin, they're just total predators on these cities and counties. Last time I looked, which is about 2.5 years ago, one lobbyist had over 35 taxpayer-funded clients. Most of them were cities. One little city that I have a note on, Fate, Texas, F-A-T-E, has only 17,000 people, but appears to be paying one lobbyist more than $1 per person to lobby against conservative values. So over $17,000 in taxpayer money from these folks in Fate, Texas, F-A-T-E, which I'll try to look up and learn where it is so we can talk about it more. Or if any listeners in Fate are hearing this, please contact the show. What do you think about $17,000 or more going to one lobbyist, a third-party guy who lives in Austin or gal and doesn't know anything about Fate, Texas, and is just using your tax dollars to ensure that the leaders of Fate, Texas get to tax you more and hire more lobbyists? I mean, we are up to $500 million over the last 10 or so years, is what it looks like to me, in taxpayer-funded money your tax dollars, going to vulture lobbyists in Austin, Texas. Almost all of them live in Austin, who just work these members. They get 8, 10, 15 members they're really close to. They're constant dining. They're always talking, even when they're not in session, sending notes and packages. And let's go hunting. Let's go on a fishing trip. Let's go do this. Let's go get a mani-pedi. There's all these ways in that these lobby groups do. And what are they trying to do? They're trying to pass ranked choice voting. Or they're trying to spend $1 per citizen on third-party lobbyists, or they're trying to ensure that the schools, which are some of the biggest violators of this, I mean, just every little association has these paid lobbyists. It's shocking. The county's association, the school board's association, the superintendent's association, they're all using taxpayer monies, or almost all of them for sure, but I think probably all of them using taxpayer monies to lobby against our values, against property tax cuts, against smaller government. Go to politicswiththebigdogs.com, sign up for our newsletter, sign up for our petition. Let's tell these members and show them we are paying attention, we are listening. And thank our friends James Quintero and TPPF for their great work, their continued advocacy of this. It's been a 10-year plus slog up the hill, up the mountain, but we're getting there. We're getting close to the top of the mountain, and we can make this happen, folks. We must ban taxpayer-funded lobbying. It's a cancer causing harm in our communities. There's just no way around it. All right, we've got to move on to a new topic, but go to politicswithbigdogs.com, go to TPPF, sign up for politicswithbigdogs.com's newsletter and petition. We will send it straight to your state rep and straight to your senator. We just need your zip code. Sometimes your address. Some of the zips are split, but not very many. Thank you so much, and we've got to move to a next topic.
Love what you're hearing? Find all of our shows at politicswiththebigdogs.com. Subscribe to our newsletter and send in your questions. politicswiththebigdogs.com.
All right, folks. Anthony Holm, Politics with the Big Dogs. We've got to get to sanctuary cities. You know, all of us who fought so hard 10, 12, 15 years ago to pass what we thought was a ban on sanctuary cities, we were just shown how duped we were by our leaders. So in 2017, you guys will remember, then Governor Abbott, been governor a heck of a long time, we just passed a law that bans sanctuary cities. There won't be one in the state of Texas. Well, guess what? Houston is now a sanctuary city. So here's what's happened. And thanks to our friends at Texas Scorecard and others who brought this to our attention, the city council in Houston voted to extinguish an existing ordinance or an ordinance that required HPD, Houston Police Department, to hold individuals for up to 30 minutes to allow ICE agents time to respond to the scene. So first and foremost, I'm struck that our largest city in the state of Texas, millions of people live there, and the police department, the city had an ordinance that said you couldn't hold folks you believe to be here illegally more than 30 minutes to allow ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, to do their job and or respond to a scene. And when I read this, I thought, well, wait a second. It's illegal. We banned the sanctuary cities. Shame on us, or at least shame on me, but I think it's shame on all of us. We probably would agree. We banned that 10 years ago. We fought, you and I and others fought for 5, 6, 7 years to force it pretty much down the throats of then Speaker Strauss and the Senate. There's a lot of opposition to it. We finally did it, and Greg Abbott went on a big tour, and we did it, and we banned sanctuary cities. Well, it turns out what that ban of sanctuary cities was just a state law that says, hey, guess what, cities? You have to follow federal law, even when it applies to immigration. Well, that's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, why would any of us think that they weren't already following federal law? What that ban, quote-unquote ban, did not do was say, you got to allow ICE time to do their job. It's just shocking to me. So again, here we think we do all these things. We think we ended CRT and DEI and banned sanctuary cities, and, shame on us. We were duped again. It doesn't matter that for 30 years Republicans have controlled the Texas legislature and all the statewide offices. There's a difference between moving conservative policy and voting in, these moderate, go along, get along Republicans. We've talked about Tepper recently of Lubbock, the Carl Tepper. Anybody who's just bought and paid for by any lobby group, they get $1 million or 95% of their donations from one lobby group. They're going to do what that lobby group wants, independent of it being conservative or not. So what happened recently? The city council in Houston, with the mayor's assistance and vote, approved a new ordinance, 12-5, that eliminates the 30-minute requirement where HPD has to hold people so ICE can respond to the scene or say, oh, hey, we've been looking for that person, detain them, they're not here legally. So full-on sanctuary city, 100%. If you get stopped by the cops now in Houston, you're immediately released. They are not giving a 30-minute hold window for ICE. I'm just shocked, 100% shocked that this is all we were doing previously. I'm also struck by the fairly recent election of John Whitmire as mayor of Houston, because here's a Democrat who had been in the Texas Senate forever and a day. In fact, he was one of the Democrats that Dan Patrick kept as a chairman for a long time and really put a lot of faith and trust in. And now we see where his true policy chops lie, right? John Whitmire, mayor of Houston, who campaigned against Sheila Jackson Lee for that role, for that office and did so on a, we're going to fight crime message. We're going to deter crime. He joined with these moderates on the council and said, we're going to eliminate this 30-minute requirement. When you detain somebody, Houston Police Department, you do not give 30 minutes notice about who you detain to ICE so that they have an opportunity to arrive and take custody if that's what they want to do. I mean, it's just shocking to us. I don't know how to say it. It's just so shocking. And here again, we thought we had handled this when we put a statewide ban on sanctuary cities. So as I understand the system, how it had been before this vote was if ICE had put a hold or a warrant on one of illegal immigrant to get caught, apprehended, be given a court date, they no-show on the court day, and then a warrant goes out, right? It said, hey, you got to give ICE 30 minutes to come and pick this person up or decide what they want to do. Well, the city of Houston, with the support of the mayor, has now passed 12-5 an affirmative ordinance that says you may not do that. And Whitmire's quote on X, quote, I've always been clear, Houston follows local and state law. We are not ICE, and we do not enforce federal immigration law. Today I joined a majority of City Council to pass a sensitive ordinance on immigration procedures, staying focused on public safety, not politics. So what's this do? It means that when HPD stops somebody on public safety grounds, they are not allowed to communicate that information if they're holding somebody to ICE, who ICE's active warrant out. Like, how is this not a sanctuary city? Well, it seems to me that it is. And you know what that really means is we got duped 10 years ago. This whole statewide law, it turns out, is that we won't have a sanctuary city is just, hey, you've got to follow federal law. Well, that's not ending sanctuary cities. And it appears that Whitmire is basically saying, hey, we're following the law, state and federal law. We are not ICE. And if you want us to do something else, you got to pass a federal law that says the local police have to hold them for 30 minutes or an hour or 90 minutes. It's not our job. So again, sounds like maybe Houston was already a sanctuary city, but for the feds, and now it certainly is. So the 5 rational, sane council members who oppose this put out a statement. Of course, HPD totally opposed it. Houston Police Officers Union came out sharply against the ordinance. I mean, Whitmire got in there on the back of the cops and is just gone totally with the lefties. So it's just shocking, but sadly it's kind of not. And the head of one of the HPD unions said, without a defined window for ICE to respond, individual officers could face liability if someone they are required to release goes on to commit a crime. So we can't hold them and we can't call ICE is the takeaway there. So these 5 sane council members, Vice Mayor Pro Tem Amy Peck, Council Member Fred Flickinger, Councilwoman Mary Nan Huffman, Councilman Willie Davis, and Council Member Twyla Carter put out a statement that I'm going to read. Standing with HPD, we voted against the proposed Proposition A ordinance related to immigration policy and ICE. The passage of this ordinance at today's council meeting will likely have unintended and harmful consequences for Houston. While we all want policies that promote safety and fairness, we are particularly concerned that placing a national spotlight on our city will create unsafe situations for our community and exacerbate the pressure placed on law enforcement. We believe that this ordinance places onerous and arbitrary reporting requirements which are intended to influence HPD officers into exercising discretion in instances where an inquiry into immigration status may have otherwise occurred. In short, this ordinance will make officers afraid to do their jobs. Couldn't agree more. Basically, don't inquire to their immigration status is what they're instructed at all, because then it's possible you have a federal duty to take an action, and there's some question whether you have a state duty. I think this is about to be litigated. But again, shockingly, we have to go litigate something that we thought the Republicans, our people, fixed, and they claimed to fix 10 years ago. It goes on to say, additionally, we have serious concerns about the uncertainty this creates for law enforcement. Without clear guidance on time frames to wait for ICE, It creates confusion from our officers and opens the city of Houston to potential lawsuits. We remain committed to working on solutions that protect our community, uphold the law, and ensure Houston continues to be a safe place for all residents. So, look, the police are saying we can't just detain somebody because that's illegal. We need to have cause. We need to have an instruction to detain somebody. 30 minutes seems awfully short to me, but it's not unreasonable relative, particularly compared to zero, right? To zero time. Basically, the city has created an environment where the police are instructed not to ask. Even if somebody said, hey, I'm here illegally, it probably violates their policy to continue to process it further. I mean, this is just a straight-up sanctuary city, no way around it, driven by the mayor, driven by leftist activists, and spitting in the face of certainly conservative values, what we thought was a state law, and it makes us all have to go back and question, what all did we let these guys get away with in 2017 when they went around touting we have ended sanctuary cities in Texas, because it sure doesn't look that way. And last but not least is John Whitmire, who spent, the last 25 years or so in the Texas Senate, and he was actively driving criminal justice policy. In fact, he was the chair, and one of the senators, conservative, Dan Patrick, relied on most. We got to now wonder, what all did the guy get away with when he was in the Senate that conservatives would have opposed? Because look at what he just did early into his term in office. He abandoned the police, he abandoned the officers' union, and he abandoned common sense. And basically said, no, I'm not breaking the law. That says a lot about the law that he opposed or voted for. He's certainly in the Senate in 2017 when we all thought we had banned sanctuary cities and our elected leaders had done what they were supposed to. So you're listening to Politics with the Big Dogs. This is Anthony Holm. Again, please go to politicswithbigdogs.com, sign up for our newsletter. Please sign the petition to ban taxpayer-funded lobbying. We've got to go and end this just atrocity. Make sure you're following us. We're on YouTube also. We are on all of the podcast platforms, Apple, everything that you'd expect. Spotify, we're there. We have 30 or so shows up and loaded for you, and please send it out and pass it around. Folks, we've got to get on to this next topic, which is the State Board of Education. You may not even know this exists. It's a group of 15 people elected. So their districts are roughly 3 U.S. House seats, are twice as big as a Texas Senate seat. Big districts elected in the R&D primary and then a general election. But this generally unknown group of people, what they do is they set the curriculum standards for all of our public schools. They review the materials, the instruction materials. They help set or actually establish, I believe, graduation requirements. And then, they oversee some of the state's investments for public schools. They also, very importantly, review proposed charter school applications, and they tend to be very difficult about getting good charters in. So what? This reasonably unknown small group that tends to be dominated by activist Democrats and educrat Republicans, right? Because the people who really pursue these areas of space aren't pro-parent Republicans. They tend to be former superintendents and teachers union types, the squish Republicans on education who don't want change, don't want accountability in the system, and want to dumb down the curriculum so it's easier for children rather than increase the outcomes for our students. So anyway, they had a hearing, and in part of the instruction material debate, it was brought to our attention that, and I got to praise U.S. House Member Brandon Gill. I've got to go meet this guy and figure him out. Maybe we'll get him on the show. Most of these Republicans elected in Texas I know, but I don't know Brandon Gill. I'm going to have to track him down. But he engaged in this because it turns out that a couple people from CARE, you guys might be familiar with CARE, which is the it is an acronym for the Council on American Islamic Relations. You'll remember that we have been talking about the Islamification of Texas, in particular in Plano. Well, that's the huge compound being built is affiliated with CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations. So a couple people associated with CARE show up at the SBOE committee, and they testify and they say, hey, you guys are using terms like radical Islam, and you're not defining what a terrorist is. You're just talking about Islamic terrorists in the course of history and some of the conflicts. And as part of the slave trade, you're talking about Islamic slave trade, which of course there was a huge Islamic slave trade. Like the whole world basically had slaves for a long period of time. So the operating manager of CARE, Shammai Zayan, Z-A-Y-A-N, and by the way, let's remind ourselves, CARE, this Council on American Islamic Relations, has been labeled a terrorist organization, a designated foreign terrorist organization by Governor Greg Abbott. So now, one of the representatives for this designated terrorist organization shows up to the SBOE and says, quote, when terrorism is not clearly defined and used only in association with Muslims, we ignite hate and prejudice against the Texas Muslim community. Definitions and labels matter, and our students deserve standards that help them objectively and critically evaluate both historical and current events. You know, as written, I generally agree with that statement. But I also agree that a disproportionate amount of terrorism done in America in the here and now are done by radicalized Muslims, period. And there's a debate going on in the world, and certainly in America and Texas, and I think a fair debate. Is Islam a weapon of radicalization? I think there's a really strong argument to say yes. So just straight up, I'm putting it out there. It doesn't mean that you have to agree with me, but I'm going to make that statement. So, and our friends at Texas Scorecard engaged in the coverage of this. Definitely always follow Texas Scorecard and Brandon Gill now. We've just got to get him on the show. So the quotes go on. Labeling slavery in this context is uniquely Islamic. Labeling slavery in this context as uniquely Islamic incorrectly suggests that the practice originated with or was defined by Islam itself. Not an unreasonable position, but we also have to have the historical evidence to say that it didn't originate there. Certainly could have. My rub is different. My rub is that people are showing up who are associated with the faith of Islam, which has been, I believe, a weapon of radicalization in Texas, number one. And number two, the same people that are showing up are also affiliated with a designated terror organization by the state government, by Governor Greg Abbott. And they're trying to instruct our elected officials what to put in our children's textbooks or to keep out or to change. Like, do we all want historically precise and academically appropriate content for our kids? Absolutely. And I've got to give great kudos and a great round of applause to the True Texas Project, who they were there. You know, I actually heard about all this after the fact. So, Fran Rhodes, on behalf of the True Texas Project, encouraged the board to reject the adoption of standards that insert Islamic practices and ideology, except in the context of world history and the development of the nations. Couldn't agree more. I mean, Islam does not have anything to do with the founding of America or the U.S. And the True Texas Project team said that they should not be included in U.S. and Texas history curriculum. I happen to agree 100% in that. So, look, as the liberals do, now the Islamists are clearly trying to indoctrinate our children and into a positive framework for their religion. And I have suggested on this show for some time, and I think many of us have seen, that the Islamification of Texas is real. And anyone who believes in the prophecies of Muhammad, I will suggest, are not in keeping with America's values. If you're going to be a hardline and read the Quran and follow the tenets of the Muslim faith in the way that keeps females from being able to educate themselves and displaces them and says you have to cover your body because we can't control ourselves as men, or says that a woman or little girl becomes a woman and can and should be married once she hits puberty. That is just not in keeping with the values. I think if we're going to open up our nation to immigrants, they have to be immigrants who are coming here to seek out our values, our economic values, our religious values, our belief in equity, and our belief in opportunity, and our belief that men and women were created equal in the image of the Lord and have all the rights and opportunities available to them that we have fought for 250 years to keep and to maintain and to spread. So this all happened at this thing called SBOE, State Board of Education. Many of you may not have even realized it exists. It's very powerful. It's very important. And we should all engage more aggressively in it. So if you want more information, definitely go to Politics with the Big Dogs. You can read about it there. You can subscribe to our newsletter. And then I want to give some strong credit to Brandon Gill, this congressman who stepped up. And again, we've got to try to get him on the show. He wrote a letter saying, it's come to the attention that an extensive lobbying effort is underway to have the State Board of Education, the SBOE, alter educational standards in a way that would diminish American and Texas history. Well said, sir. Well said. The effort is being spearheaded by the Council on American Islamic Relations, CARE, a Texas-designated foreign terrorist organization and transnational criminal enterprise. For instance, the SBOE responded to public testimony asserting that the Alamo is an Islamic building. And then he cites to it in this letter, Alan Silas, Texas education officials push to delay new subject standards. Here are the issues. The Dallas Morning News, April 8th, 2026. I got to wave a flag. I'm not as versed as I want to be or need to be to continue this exchange about how anyone is suggesting that the Alamo is an Islamic building. I encourage all of us to get educated on that and you all to seek that out. But I needed to raise this issue. We've got to be aware of it because it is just shocking to me, and I'm sure it's shocking to you, that we have members associated with a designated terrorist organization showing up at a public event, lobbying public officials to incorporate positive statements about Islam and the Muslim faith into our public school curriculum, and seemingly suggesting in some way, shape, or fashion that the Alamo is an Islamic offshoot. And Brandon Gill, and his letter is co-signed by Chip Roy, give them both credit. But Brandon Gill, I believe, is I'm very confident, leading author of this. It closes with, the SBOE has a duty to stand up for American history and now not allow it to be perverted by radical activists. I welcome the opportunity to work with you to ensure Texas's classrooms are protected from the influence of radical, pro-Islamic, terrorist-designated activists. Well said, Congressman Gill. But let's all take a moment and recognize that a U.S. congressman had to engage in this debate. I mean, it's almost surreal that it's come to this, that you and I and all these Republican leaders that we've been elected to statewide office and in the legislature and the Senate for 30 years have allowed the SBOE, a Republican-controlled group, now it's a much tighter margin, but a Republican-controlled group, to ponder notions in our history books that the Alamo is an Islamic building or radical Islamic terrorists should not be couched as such. We have an invasion going on. It's an invasion against our values. We've been talking about invasions coming across the border for decades. It's one of the reasons that I'm really appalled that after 24 years in the U.S. Senate, Cornyn was okay with us not having a border wall, and now suddenly he's like, well, just give me 6 more years, and I'll fix it. Hey, man, you've had 24 years. And while we were so focused on, and rightly focused, because millions of illegals were crossing the southern border and flooding our states and flooding our healthcare system and flooding our welfare system. And they're getting all sorts of government handouts, right? Our tax dollars. That's what this is. We're paying for their health care when they don't have insurance and they can't pay at our county hospitals. We are funding all this. Well, quietly, from the north, in the east, in the west, we're being invaded by radical Muslims. And it's so pervasive. I'm sure you've all seen the charts of how many mosques have been built in Texas in the last 20 years. Just shocking. But it is so pervasive that now folks working on behalf of a terrorist-designated organization are showing up at our public hearings and pushing to change the content, for the 5 million Texas public school children to make it pro-Islam and to tie one of the great symbols of Texas to Islam, that being the Alamo. I mean, what has happened, and why are you and I having to stand up and fight this fight? What has happened for all the Republicans that we have elected? Like, we go and we take our fights to elections and we do our part and we give them money and we go out there and block walk and we work the polls. How is this happening that we have come to hear? So we've got to move on to the next one because we're running out of time, but it deserved our time and attention. And I want to just give huge credit to Brandon Gill, and we'll get him on the show at some point. All right, folks, if you're just tuning in, this is Anthony Holm, host of Politics with the Big Dogs. Please join our newsletter, politicswiththebigdogs.com. Follow us on Spotify, on Apple, and all the podcasts. We have 30 or so up. We're also on YouTube. We've got to at least quickly move on to our next subject matter. This is just going to stun you. So, New York State, huge state, Democrat activists, not as bad as California, but pretty close, right? They have all sorts of laws that end up suppressing religious freedom, suppressing conservative thought and values, and one very conspicuous, again, for the Rhino, Carl Tepper types. I'm a trial lawyer. I practice law. This is Anthony Holm, a lawyer with an LLM, and so we're going to talk about a lawsuit. Here we go. In New York State, the Catholic Sisters, the Dominican Sisters of Hawthorne, they operate a 42-bed nursing facility. They give free palliative care to the poor who have cancer. Right? They know they can't cure anybody. And this was reported in the Wall Street Journal. It's been reported elsewhere. So I want to give credit to folks who've come before us. They're just trying to give poor people who are dying the best and most graceful exit they can. Well, it turns out that the Dominican Sisters of Hawthorne, a group of nuns who are running a care facility for the dying, have been blasted with letters from New York's health department because it turns out, go figure, the state of New York passed a Bill of Rights for LGBT seniors in 2023. And they're saying that the residents get to use you have a duty to use a resident's preferred name or pronouns. And if you fail to do that more than once, it's illegal. You also have to do it when the resident is not there. So if there's a gentleman who's dying, whose name is Mark Smith, but he chooses to go by Kathy, if you're in the break room and you say, hey, it's time for Mark Smith's next pain-relieving prescription medicine, you have broken the law. And there also, this law in California, the Bill of Rights for the senior LGBTs, it, quote, prohibiting a resident from using a restroom available to other persons of the same gender identity is a violation of the law. So if this same Mark Smith says, hey, I identify as a female, I'm going to go in with all these other dying elderly women to the restroom, and you say you can't, we have a restroom for the men and a restroom for the women, that's a violation of the law. And they're trying to prosecute the Dominican Sisters of Hawthorne. Another mandate in the law says that each of the sisters must go through, quote, cultural competency training that focuses on residents who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. legal mandate, force of law, all of these nuns are supposed to be trained for this cultural competency. We're talking about nuns, and it's just shocking. So the health department and these other agencies that regulate the nuns there have been hammering them with letters and making threats, and some of them say, quote, people who struggle with their gender identity deserve compassion, sensitivity, and respect. I mean, it's wild. So the nuns had to go out there and litigate it. And the state prohibits Rosary Hill Home and its staff from assigning patients to rooms by biological sex, prohibits patients segregating bathrooms by biological sex, and requires the use of patients' preferred pronouns, even when they're not in the room. That is directly pulled from the lawsuit the nuns had to file against the state of New York. The insanity around gender identity and making sure boys get to go into little girls' bathrooms by the radical left is just shocking. I don't have any other word for it. It's 100% shocking. And now they're attacking a group of 40 or so nuns who are living their life, helping poor people exit their life with grace and dignity, who are dying, terminally ill of cancer. They don't have a place to go. Come here. We'll help you. We'll care for you. Will console you as you exit out. And the state of New York is, you're not doing it the right way. You can't put men in the same room and women in a different room. You can't say that man is barred from using the woman's restroom. And you have to refer to him, even when he's not there, by whatever name or gender he identifies with. And if you fail to do these things, we're going to strip you of your license because you're breaking the law. That is how hardcore the activist left has become, and why we are in a fight for the values of America. I'm so grateful that we have a leader who's finally willing to take the fight to people who are chanting death to America, which means death to American values, burning our flags, kill an infidel. I'm heartbroken that former presidents, and frankly, even Republicans in Congress, let so many radical Muslims into America, into Michigan, where they're taking over city councils. They're in the streets saying death to America while they're here as American citizens or waiting to become American citizens. They're burning flags. They're saying Islam will take over. We will win. We will get you in your homes. We will get your children. They will bow to Allah. You know, there are prayer whistles all over the place. Radical Muslim philosophical and ideology and faith is incompatible with American values. And it is time that we wake up and recognize that. So to the extent that since 1978, every American president, D or R, has known they needed to do something to manage Iran and its attempts to get nuclear weapons, and nobody's had the courage to go and get it done until Trump. I'm really impressed by that. Israel will do it every so often. They have to. They have no choice. They have to go hit them and knock their nuclear programs back, because these guys are saying death to Israel, death to America. The attacks on the nuns are the values of the radical left already in America. And shame on every Republican. Frankly, shame on every congressman and senator. But I'm going to single out the Republicans over the last 25 years who have not stopped this. Because now you and I and our children and grandchildren are going to have to deal with it. We're going to have to hit it head on. We're going to have to root it out and go to all the SBOE meetings, go to every other meeting and pay attention and call it out and burn our time, you and I, talking about this instead of lowering taxes or some other fundamental thing that we could be doing.
Politics with the Big Dogs with Anthony Holm is supported in part by the First Amendment Alliance Education Fund. From deep in the heart of Texas, you've been listening to Politics with the Big Dogs.